My wife left me in a foreign country with nothing but a wedding ring and a lie. No money, no passport, no explanation. Just a text that said, "Don't try to find me. It's better this way." I'm Harlan Pierce, and for 26 years, I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought it meant showing up, doing the work, fixing things when they broke. Turns out, I was wrong about almost everything. This story isn't about how I got destroyed, it's about what happened after I hit rock bottom and discovered I had a choice. Stay broken, or rebuild myself into something she never saw coming. The thing is, I didn't go looking for redemption. Redemption came looking for me when I had absolutely nothing left to lose. Let me take you back to where this all started. Portugal, 2019. A coastal town where the wine flows like water and the sunsets turn the sky gold. That's where everything fell apart. That's also where I found out who I really was. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I'm Harlan Pierce, and I'm about to tell you the truth about the day my entire life changed. We were supposed to be on our second honeymoon. Clarissa, my wife, had been talking about this trip for months. Portugal, she said. The vineyards, the history, the romance. She wanted to save our marriage. At least, that's what she told me. We'd been drifting for years, arguing about money, about my job taking over everything, about how she felt invisible next to my ambitions. The fights had become background noise. But when she suggested this trip, something in me wanted to believe it could work. That we could find our way back to each other. The first week was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. We walked through Lisbon's narrow streets holding hands like teenagers. We drank wine at sunset and laughed at jokes that weren't even funny. I kept thinking, we're going to make it. This is the turning point. She had this look on her face. Peaceful, almost relieved. I should have seen it for what it was, relief that she was almost done pretending. On the 7th day, everything changed. We were driving toward a small village she'd read about, supposed to be famous for its artisan shops and local crafts. She was unusually quiet that morning. When I asked what was wrong, she just smiled and said, "You'll see soon enough." That phrase, that smile. It didn't feel right, but I pushed it aside. We stopped at a roadside cafe. Nothing fancy, just a place where old Portuguese men drank thick coffee and argued about football. She asked me to run inside and grab us some drinks while she made a quick call. I remember exactly what I ordered, her favorite, iced espresso with lemon. I paid the guy behind the counter, turned around to head back out, and that's when I felt it. That cold, sinking feeling you get when something fundamental has shifted and you can't take it back. The table was empty. The rental car was gone. Clarissa was gone. Just like that, in the time it took me to order 2 coffees, my wife had vanished from my life. I stood there for what felt like forever, the cold drinks in my hands, waiting for her to walk through the door and laugh about playing a prank. She didn't come back. Nobody comes back when they've decided to leave. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. One last message. One last lie. And then, silence. What happened next would either destroy me completely or force me to become someone I never imagined I could be. What do you think Harlan should have done in that moment? Should he have called the police immediately? The consulate? Or should he have just sat there, waiting for her to come back? Comment below and let me know. Stick around for chapter 2 where everything gets worse before it gets better. I didn't call anyone for 3 hours. I just sat at that cafe table, the espresso getting warm, waiting for some explanation that never came. The owner kept looking at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe when your wife walks out of your life, you're supposed to lose it. Instead, I just sat there, numb, trying to make sense of what had just happened. When reality finally crashed down, it came hard. No passport. No credit cards. No way to get a flight home. I had maybe €200 in my wallet, money I'd withdrawn for emergencies. Clarissa had the rental car, the hotel booking, the packed suitcase with my documents. Everything. She'd planned this carefully. Too carefully for it to be anything other than deliberate. I called our kids that night from a borrowed phone at the hotel. Julian didn't pick up. Mara answered on the third ring, and before I could even say what happened, she said something that cut deeper than any physical pain ever could. "Dad, Mom told us you were having issues. She said you'd been drinking, that you were getting aggressive, that you refused to leave the hotel." Mara's voice was cold. Cold in a way I'd never heard from my daughter before. "She said you needed help, and she couldn't handle it anymore." I hadn't touched alcohol in 5 years. 5 years of AA meetings, 5 years of clean living, 5 years of proving to my family that I'd changed. Clarissa knew that. She knew exactly what would hurt the most. So she lied. She told our kids I was unstable, dangerous, the very version of myself I'd spent years escaping. And they believed her because mothers don't lie to their kids. They believe their mothers. The first few nights were a blur of hotels I couldn't afford and desperation I couldn't shake. I tried to get into the American embassy, but it was the weekend. I slept in the train station. I sat on benches in the park, watching tourists laugh and take photos, wondering how they could be so happy when my entire world had just evaporated. By day 3, my money was running out. I'd eaten 1 meal in 2 days. My suit was wrinkled, my face hadn't seen a razor in days, and I looked exactly like what I felt. Like a man who'd been abandoned in a foreign country with nothing but shame and confusion. That's when I met Sophia. I was sitting outside a small diner, the kind of place where the coffee cost 50 cents and the owner knew everyone who came through the door. Sophia found me there at dawn, and instead of telling me to leave like every other business owner had done, she asked if I was hungry. Her English was broken, mixed with Portuguese and Italian, but her meaning was clear. She'd lost her husband 10 years earlier, she said. She knew what it meant to feel abandoned. She didn't ask questions. She just brought me food. Sophia wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. She was weathered, strong, real. She had gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that looked like they'd worked every day of her life. When she sat down across from me, I started crying. I couldn't help it. This stranger was showing me more kindness than my own wife had shown me in years, and the unfairness of it broke something open inside me. "What happened?" she asked, her dark eyes steady on mine. "I got left behind," I said. Just that. Those 4 words summed up everything. She nodded like she understood completely. Maybe she did. "You work?" she asked. "I used to," I said. "I'm a carpenter. Design work, mostly." "Come," she said. "Tomorrow, you work for me. I pay small, but you eat, yes." That was it. No background check, no questions about my past, no judgment. She gave me a chance when I had nothing else, and that single act of compassion became the moment everything started to change. But I didn't know that yet. I just knew I had one more day before complete collapse. What would you have done if a stranger showed you that kind of kindness? Would you have accepted the help, or would you have let your pride destroy you? Tell me in the comments below. You don't want to miss Chapter 3, where Harlan discovers that sometimes the people who save you are the ones you never expected. I started working at Sophia's diner the next morning. She didn't give me the easy jobs. I washed dishes in a kitchen that must have been 70 degrees in a Portuguese summer. I scrubbed pans until my hands bled. I mopped floors that had seen better decades. But she fed me 3 times a day, and she called me by my name instead of treating me like a homeless guy she was doing charity for. "Harlan," she'd say. "The pans in back. Make them shine." I did. Because for the first time in days, Someone was treating me like I still mattered. Like I could still do something valuable, even if it was just washing dishes. Sophia had a way of looking at you that made you believe things could get better. She was in her early 70s, I guessed. Her hands were always moving, cooking, cleaning, helping customers. Her late husband had owned a vineyard outside of town before he died. She talked about him while we worked, never sad, just matter of fact. He was a good man, she'd say. He worked hard. He built something. He died doing what he loved, and she didn't regret a single day. "You're not broken, Harlan," she told me one afternoon while I was chopping vegetables. "You're unfinished." I laughed because the alternative was crying. "Sophia, I'm 52 years old. I think I'm done being unfinished." "No," she said firmly. "You finish now. Different finish. Better finish." She had a friend named Luca who owned a vineyard about 4 kilometers outside town. One day, Sophia told me Luca needed a driver, someone to transport wine orders to restaurants and hotels in Lisbon. The pay was better than washing dishes. There was a chance for more work if I proved myself reliable. She made it sound simple, like getting a new job was something I could actually do, like I wasn't a broken, abandoned man sleeping in her storage room. I took the job. Luca was nothing like Sophia. He was a stocky man in his 60s with a thick accent and eyes that didn't miss anything. He hired me with barely a handshake, paid me in cash, and worked me like a dog. But he was fair. More importantly, he didn't ask questions about my past. All he cared about was whether the deliveries got made on time and whether the product arrived in perfect condition. I became obsessed with being good at that job. It wasn't complicated work, but I treated it like I was driving the most precious cargo in the world. Every bottle arrived safely. Every customer was satisfied. Every route was optimized. After 2 months, Luca asked me if I knew how to fix things. "I'm a carpenter," I said. "Designed custom furniture back in the States." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "The tasting room door is broken. The frame is rotting. Can you fix it?" I rebuilt that door from scratch. I reinforced the frame, sourced wood that matched the original, and added hardware that looked like it belonged in a high-end hotel instead of a vineyard in Portugal. When Luca saw it, he just said, "Good work." That was the first time someone had acknowledged what I could do since Clarissa left me. It felt like someone had turned a light back on inside me. One afternoon, I was working on a new wine storage cabinet when I overheard some tourists speaking English. A woman mentioned a name that made my blood go cold, Clarissa Pierce. She was apparently in Spain now, traveling with some man she'd met online. "Happy as could be," the tourist said. "Heading down the coast with barely a suitcase and no plans. Just moving from place to place, following this guy around like he was everything she'd ever wanted." I stood there with my hands in wood shavings, listening to strangers describe my wife's new life, and something shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was release. She was gone. Really gone. And suddenly, I realized something that changed everything. I didn't need her to come back. I didn't need her to apologize or explain or take back what she'd done. I just needed to build something here. Something real. Something that was mine. I looked out toward the vineyard, where the sun was setting gold over the hills, and I said the words out loud. "Run as far as you want, Clarissa. I'm done chasing you." That was the moment I stopped being the man she left behind and started becoming someone new. But I had no idea what was about to happen next, or how far I'd actually go. Does this moment resonate with you? Have you ever reached a point where you realized the person you were losing didn't matter anymore? Share your story in the comments. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter of this transformation story. Next chapter is when everything starts to accelerate. You're not going to want to miss. A year passed, and I barely noticed the time disappearing. I was too busy working. Luca started giving me bigger projects. A whole new storage facility needed renovation. The aging wine cellar needed structural reinforcement. I threw myself into those jobs like they were the only things that mattered, and in a way they were. Work was clean. Work had structure. Work didn't betray you. By the 8th month, Luca handed me something I hadn't felt in years: respect. He started introducing me to other vineyard owners, other business people in the region. "This is Harlan," he'd say. "He fixes things. He builds things. He knows quality." I started taking on side projects. A wine bar in Lisbon needed custom furniture. A boutique hotel wanted handcrafted pieces for their rooms. I was designing again, doing the work I'd loved back in the States but had abandoned when marriage and kids and bills made it feel impractical. Out here, with nothing to lose, impractical became freedom. Money started coming in. Not a lot at first, but enough. Enough to move out of Sophia's storage room. Enough to rent a small apartment. Enough to realize that I could actually survive without Clarissa's approval, without my children's acknowledgement, without any of the things I'd been chasing my whole life. One day, Sophia gave me a gift. It was a hand-painted wooden sign that read, "Pierce and Purpose." She'd made it herself, the letters carefully carved, the paint faded just right so it looked like it had been hanging in an Italian villa for decades. "For your business, Harlan. When you started, you put this up. You remember, you have purpose now." I held that sign like it was made of gold. I'm not a sentimental man, but I couldn't stop looking at it. This old woman who owed me nothing had somehow seen something in me that I'd forgotten was there. A purpose. A reason to keep going. "I'm going to start my own company," I told her that night. "Pierce Artisan Designs. Custom furniture, restoration work, luxury pieces for high-end clients." She hugged me. Sophia wasn't a hugger, but she did. "You're going to be something, Harlan Pierce. I can feel it." I registered the company with almost no money and a lot of hope. I took jobs that didn't pay well just to build a portfolio. I worked 16-hour days, perfecting every detail, making sure every client was treated like they were royalty. Word travels fast in small communities. Within 6 months, I had more business than I could handle alone. I hired my first employee, a young Portuguese guy named Miguel who wanted to learn the craft. By the end of year 1, I'd moved into a real workshop. By the end of year 2, I had 4 employees and a waiting list of clients that stretched 6 months out. Restaurants wanted my tables. Hotels wanted my headboards. Wealthy families wanted my designs in their homes. I was building something. Not just a business, a life. A real, solid, tangible life that was completely separate from the ghost of Harlan Pierce who'd been abandoned in a cafe in 2019. I was sitting in my workshop one afternoon, reviewing designs for a major hotel chain, when it hit me: I was happy. Not the kind of happiness that depends on someone else's approval. Not the fragile happiness that comes from chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught. Real, deep, earned happiness that comes from creating something with your own hands. I called Sophia that night. "I'm buying land," I said. "Outside of town. I'm going to build a studio. A real place for the business." She laughed. "Of course you are. I always knew you would. That land would become the foundation for everything that came next. But I didn't know that yet. I just knew that for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward something. And that made all the difference. Are you building something in your life, or are you still running from your past? This is what separates the people who win from the people who stay stuck. Comment below and tell me what you're building. Subscribe now and turn on notifications to never miss an episode. Your story matters. In Chapter 5, Harlan reaches a level of success he never imagined, and everything changes again. 3 years. That's how long it took for me to go from washing dishes to running a company that was being featured in design magazines. 3 years of work that didn't feel like work because it meant something. 3 years of proving to myself that I wasn't the man Clarissa had tried to erase. Pierce Artisan Designs wasn't just a business anymore, it was a brand. My pieces were being sold to collectors in Lisbon, Madrid, and Barcelona. Hotels were commissioning custom work. Wealthy families wanted my furniture in their villas. I'd built something that had real value, not just financial but cultural. People were starting to call me Senor Pierce, and they said it with respect in their voices. The workshop I built became a gathering place. Young craftspeople came to learn from me. I was teaching again, something I never expected to do. I was mentoring kids who had passion but no direction, showing them that quality matters, that integrity in your work is everything, that if you build something right, people will see it. Sophia came by every few weeks. She'd watch me work, and she'd just smile. She never said anything particularly profound, but she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. She was the proof that kindness still existed in the world, that there were people who helped you not because they wanted something but because they understood suffering. One afternoon, she brought me a stack of local newspapers and magazine clippings. All of them featured my work. "The American Reborn," one headline read. "Senor Pierce transforms Portuguese craftsmanship," said another. I was becoming someone people knew about, someone they respected, someone they wanted to be associated with. I'd never been that guy before. In the States, I was competent, reliable, predictable. Nobody threw parties because I existed. Nobody asked for my advice. Clarissa was the one who lit up rooms. I just worked behind the scenes, pushing people toward their dreams while my own dreams kept getting smaller. But here, in Portugal, I was becoming the person I was supposed to be all along. Not through inheritance or connections or luck. Through pure, stubborn, relentless work. By year 4, I had enough money to do something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I bought property back in Lisbon. The town where I'd started my marriage, the place where Clarissa and I had raised our kids, the place that represented everything I'd lost. I didn't buy it to go back. I bought it as a statement, a way of saying, I was here. I mattered. And I'm taking back my history. It was a small property, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Paid in cash. The deed had my name on it, with no ghost of my past cluttering it up. I renovated it slowly, putting my own touch on every room, making it into something completely separate from what it had been when Clarissa lived there. I still didn't reach out to Julian or Mara. They believed what their mother had told them, and I'd learned that you can't rebuild a relationship when someone has poisoned the foundation. Sometimes you have to accept that the people you created don't want to know who you became. It hurt, but it didn't destroy me. That was the victory. I could feel that pain without letting it stop me. The Portuguese government fast-tracked my citizenship application. By year 4, I was officially a Portuguese citizen. Portugal wasn't the place I'd been abandoned anymore. It was the place I'd been reborn. I was Senor Harlan Pierce, citizen of Portugal, owner of a thriving business, a man with a name that meant something in his community. I remember standing on the balcony of my villa overlooking the vineyard one evening, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and red. I had a good life. I had real friends. I had work that satisfied me. I had respect. And most importantly, I had myself, the unfinished version that Sophia had seen in a broken man at her diner door, now fully formed into something real. I was happy. Genuinely, thoroughly, unapologetically happy. And I hadn't needed anyone's permission to get here. But destiny, as it always does, had one more card to play. One more twist I never saw coming. One that would test whether I'd truly become the man I'd convinced myself I was. What do you think is coming? Does Harlan get to keep his peace, or does his past come knocking? The answer is in Chapter 6, and trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. Subscribe and turn on your notifications right now so you don't miss the moment everything falls apart and comes back together. This story is about to get intense. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. A letter arrived at my workshop on a Tuesday morning in October. That's how my past came back, not with a bang, but with an official-looking envelope from a law firm in Massachusetts. My hands were shaking when I opened it. After 4 years of silence, of building, of becoming someone new, here was proof that my old life still existed somewhere. That it still had claims on me. The letter was about property. The house in Leesbourne, the one I'd shared with Clarissa for 2 decades. The deed still had both our names on it. There were questions about inheritance, about what happened to her mother's estate, about financial obligations. It was bureaucratic, cold, impersonal. But what it really said was this: your past isn't done with you yet. I stared at that letter for an hour. I could have thrown it away. I could have ignored it, hired a lawyer to handle it, let the legal system sort it out while I kept building my life here. That would have been the smart move. That would have been what someone who truly moved on would do. Instead, I called a real estate agent in Leesbourne. 3 months later, I owned that house outright. I didn't buy it to move back or to reclaim some nostalgia. I bought it as a final statement to myself: I'm not running from anything anymore. I own my history, even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts. I renovated it myself, spending weeks there during slow periods at the workshop. I rebuilt the kitchen where Clarissa and I had fought about money. I refinished the floors where our kids had learned to walk. I painted every room a different color than she'd chosen, erasing her taste but not her presence. This house had been a grave where I'd been buried alive. Now I was turning it into a monument to resurrection. When I came back to Portugal and hung that photograph of the renovated Leesbourne house in my workshop, something felt complete. Not healed. I don't think you heal from abandonment. But integrated. Acknowledged. The past couldn't touch the present I'd built because I'd already claimed ownership of both. But the universe, I was learning, never lets you feel too comfortable. It was a late Friday afternoon in April, 4 years and 5 months after Clarissa left me in that cafe. My assistant, Miguel, came running into my office looking panicked. He barely spoke English, and his words came out jumbled, but I caught the main one: woman. There was a woman at the workshop asking for me. She said she was my wife. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a moment. Then I stood up slowly, straightened my shirt, and walked toward the front of the building. I had no idea what I was about to see, but I had a terrible feeling I knew exactly who it was. When I pushed open the workshop door, there she was. Clarissa. But not the woman who'd left me in Portugal 4 years ago. This was an older version, worn down by time and consequences. She was thin in a way that suggested hardship, not fitness. Her hair had more gray than I remembered. Her designer clothes were replaced by something generic, something practical. She looked like a woman who'd been through something that broke her and then taped her back together with the wrong kind of glue. She smiled when she saw me, but it was nervous. Like she wasn't sure if I'd slam the door in her face or call the police. "Harlan," she whispered, "you look different." I didn't know what to say. I'd imagined this moment 100 times, what I'd do, what I'd say, how I'd feel. But all those fantasies disappeared the second she appeared in front of me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just calm, which somehow felt worse. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice was level, professional, like she was a client I'd just met. She looked down at the suitcase she was dragging. It was small, worn, the kind of suitcase someone carries when they have nowhere else to go and everything they own fits inside it. When she looked back up, Her eyes were red. "I just need a place to stay," she said. "Just until I can get back on my feet. I know I have no right to ask. I know what I did. But I have nowhere else to go." That's when I realized something crucial. She'd come here to ask for mercy from a man she'd destroyed. She had no idea that the man she'd destroyed didn't exist anymore. The question was, would I give her what she was asking for? What would you do if the person who hurt you most came back, asking for help? Would you turn them away, or would you offer shelter? The answer to this question defines everything you are. Don't miss Chapter 7, because this is where the real test begins. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you're not left in suspense. Comment below and tell me what you would do in this moment. Your answer says everything about your character. I let her stay in the guest house. That was the first decision. Not because I forgave her. Not because I still loved her. Not because I wanted her back or because I was trying to prove something noble. I let her stay because watching her suffer would have made me the same kind of person she was, and I'd worked too hard to become someone better than that. She moved into the guest house on a Thursday. It was a small structure separate from the main villa, modernized but rustic, comfortable but lonely. Perfect for someone who didn't belong anywhere. Miguel helped bring her things in, which didn't take long because she literally owned almost nothing. No expensive luggage, no designer bags, no evidence of wealth. Just a woman and her regrets. I kept our relationship purely transactional. She could eat dinner with me on Monday and Thursday nights. That was it. No late-night conversations. No catching up on lost years. No pretending like we were still married or ever could be again. She was a guest in my home, nothing more. But what happened next was something I didn't anticipate. By being forced to observe my life from the outside, she had to see what she'd actually given up. She watched as business partners came to dinner, men and women who respected me, sought my advice, wanted to be associated with my name. She listened as conversations happened in Portuguese and English, about expansion plans and new designs and opportunities one was creating. She saw the photographs on my walls from design magazines, the awards sitting on shelves, the evidence of someone who'd built something real from absolutely nothing. She went into my workshop one afternoon and found me working with Miguel and two other craftsmen, all of us focused, all of us committed to excellence. She watched me teach a young apprentice how to sand wood properly, how to see the grain and work with it instead of against it. She saw me moving through the world with a kind of quiet confidence I'd never possessed when I was married to her. One evening, she was there when Sophia came by. Sophia didn't acknowledge Clarissa at first, just came over and hugged me and asked about a recent project. Then Sophia looked at Clarissa standing awkwardly in the corner, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Pity, definitely. "This is my wife," I said, introducing them. Sophia raised one eyebrow, just one, and then she smiled like she understood everything that had happened and everything that was about to happen. "The woman who left," Sophia said in her broken English. It wasn't a question. Clarissa nodded, shame coloring her face. Sophia looked at me, then back at Clarissa. "He was dead when I found him. 4 years ago. Now he's alive. You see the difference." Sophia left after that, and I never brought up the conversation. But Clarissa did. She asked me what Sophia meant. She asked if I'd been suicidal, if I'd thought about killing myself. The truth was more complicated and more simple than that. I just stopped existing, in everyone else's eyes and almost in my own. Clarissa just accelerated what was already happening. The hardest part wasn't living with her in the guest house. It was watching her face as she came to understand what she'd thrown away. It wasn't just a husband, it was a life. A good life. A life where she could have had respect and stability and partnership with someone who was actually building something meaningful. She'd left me for a fantasy, A man she met online who promised adventure and excitement and proof that life was still worth living. That man had taken her money, used her, and abandoned her in Spain with nothing but a hotel bill and a realization that she'd destroyed her marriage for a lie. Now she was watching me live the fantasy she'd actually wanted, the one I'd built while she was gone. One afternoon, she came to me while I was sketching designs for a new project. "Do you hate me?" she asked. Her voice was so small, so diminished, so completely different from the woman who'd spoken with such certainty in that cafe 4 years ago. I looked up from my work. "No," I said honestly. "Hate requires energy I don't have. I'm too busy with my life." That answer broke something in her more than anger ever could have. She started appearing less frequently at dinner. She spent more time in the guest house alone. I'd see her sometimes standing at the edge of the vineyard at sunset, watching the sun go down, and I knew she was watching more than just the sky. She was watching the life she could have had. The thing about justice is that it doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes the cruelest justice is simply forcing someone to see what they destroyed through the eyes of someone who survived it anyway. She was disappearing before my eyes, not physically but spiritually. All the spark was gone. All the light she used to carry had been extinguished by the weight of her own choices. And as much as I wanted to feel satisfaction about that, I mostly just felt tired. What happens when you realize the person who hurt you is suffering more than you ever did? Does that change anything? Does that create an obligation to show mercy? These are the questions that separate people who are just surviving from people who are actually living. Comment below and share your thoughts. Subscribe and enable notifications, because Chapter 8 is where everything starts to shift. The tension in this story is about to reach its peak. 3 weeks into her stay, Clarissa stopped coming to dinner altogether. She'd send a message saying she wasn't hungry or wasn't feeling well. I didn't push it. I'd given her shelter and civility, which was more than she deserved and probably more than she needed. But one evening, I decided to walk past the guest house. I told myself it was just to check on things, to make sure she had everything she needed. That was a lie. I was curious about what loneliness looked like when it finally caught up with someone who'd spent years running from it. Through the window, I could see her sitting on the bed, staring at nothing. Not on her phone. Not reading. Just sitting there, alone with her thoughts, which I imagine was the worst place she could possibly be. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. Instead, I went inside. She looked up, surprised, then tried to compose herself. There wasn't much to compose. She was just a woman who'd made bad decisions and was finally paying the price for all of them at once. "I'm sorry," she said. It came out automatic, rehearsed. She'd probably been practicing saying it for weeks. "I know you are," I replied. That wasn't cruelty, it was just acceptance. She was sorry, but sorry doesn't rebuild anything. Sorry doesn't give back time. Sorry doesn't undo lies or abandonment or the specific kind of pain that comes from being left by someone you trusted completely. "I don't expect forgiveness," she continued. "I just want you to understand why." That was the trap I could have walked into. That was the moment where I could have let her reframe everything, where she could turn her abandonment into a story about her own pain or her own journey or her own awakening. I'd seen people do that 1,000 times, turn their cruelty into someone else's responsibility to understand. "I don't need to understand why," I said. "I need to understand that it happened. And it did. And I'm still here." She started crying then, and I stood there watching her without moving. Not out of coldness, but out of clarity. These were her tears, not mine. Her grief, not mine. I'd already cried my tears in train stations and public parks and behind Sophia's diner. I'd already grieved the marriage, the kids, the life I thought I was going to have. I was done with that grief. What I was experiencing now was something else. It was the peace that comes from surviving something that was supposed to destroy you. It was the quiet satisfaction of becoming someone stronger than your pain. It was the knowledge that I didn't need her apology to make sense of my story anymore. You should go back, I said. Back to the States. Back to Julian and Mara. Tell them the truth about what happened. Tell them everything. Don't expect them to forgive you right away, but at least give them the chance to decide for themselves what you are and what you mean to them. Don't let their relationship with me be complicated by half-truths. She looked at me like I was speaking a language she'd forgotten. You'd let me do that? Tell them the truth. I don't let you do anything, I said. You're an adult. Make your choices. But know that I'm not going to lie anymore. Not to protect you, not to protect myself, not to protect anyone. The truth is what happened here, and if you want any chance of rebuilding with your kids, that's where you have to start. The next morning, she was gone. She left the guest house clean and the key on the table. No note, no forwarding address, no final words. Just absence, which seemed appropriate given how our marriage had begun. I didn't feel victorious about it. I didn't feel like I'd won something. I just felt like a chapter had finally closed in a way that made sense. Not dramatically. Not satisfyingly. Just finally. Sophia came by that evening, and somehow she already knew. She always knew things. She left. Sophia asked, sitting in my workshop while I worked on a new piece. She left, I confirmed. Sophia nodded like she'd expected this exact outcome. She was never your ending, Harlan. She was just a character in your beginning. Now you're in the middle of your real story, and the characters in this part are the ones who actually believe in you. I didn't say anything because there wasn't anything left to say. I just kept working, my hands moving through the motions of creation, building something new while the past finally faded into appropriate insignificance. Does closure always have to feel like triumph? Sometimes the most powerful moment is the quiet one, the moment when you realize someone who once destroyed you is now completely irrelevant to your life. That's victory. That's justice. That's freedom. Have you experienced that? Share your story in the comments. This is the kind of truth that sets people free. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss Chapter 9, where everything comes together. Your story matters, and we want to hear it. I didn't hear from Clarissa again for 6 weeks. Not a text, not a phone call, not even a forwarded message through mutual acquaintances. Just silence, which at this point felt like the only appropriate ending to a marriage that had ended in silence too. But one morning, a letter arrived at my workshop. The envelope was thick, high-quality paper, addressed in handwriting I recognized but hadn't seen in 5 years. I opened it sitting at my desk, with Miguel working quietly in the background, the sound of craftsmanship filling the air around me. The letter was short. No explanation. No apology. No desperate plea for another chance. Just one sentence, written clearly, deliberately. I finally understand what I threw away. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. There was so much weight in those 10 words. Not the weight of regret. Regret is self-pitying. The weight of genuine comprehension. She'd finally seen it. She'd finally understood that the man I'd become wasn't an exception, or an accident, or the result of luck. I'd built myself deliberately, day after day, choice after choice, refusing to let her abandonment define my narrative. I folded that letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Not as a scar. Not as proof of my pain. As evidence of my survival. That afternoon, I sat with Sophia in her diner, the same place where she'd first offered me a job when I had nothing. We drank coffee and didn't talk much. With Sophia, you didn't need to fill the silence. It was enough to just exist together, Two people who understood what it meant to lose everything and have to rebuild. What happens now? Sophia asked, not like it was a question about my immediate future, but like it was a deeper question about who I wanted to be next. Now I keep building, I said. That's what I do. I build things. Houses, furniture, businesses, relationships. That's who I am. Not angry anymore, Sophia observed. Never was really angry, I replied. That was just confusion dressed up as emotion. Anger requires believing you were wronged by someone with the power to make it right. Clarissa didn't have that power. She was just a woman making bad decisions. She hurt me, yes. But she didn't define me. Sophia smiled like a grandmother who's finally seen her grandchild become an adult. You know what I think. I think you became the man you needed to be because she left you. Not despite it. Because of it. I'd been thinking the same thing, but hearing Sophia say it made it real in a different way. It meant my story wasn't a tragedy with a miraculous ending. It was a story about transformation. It was a story about how sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is exactly what needs to happen for you to become who you were always supposed to be. That night, I went to my villa and stood on the balcony looking out at the vineyard. The same view I'd stood on 4 years earlier, feeling complete, feeling like I'd reached the top of something. But this was different. This was deeper. This wasn't the satisfaction of external success, it was the satisfaction of internal integration. I was a whole person now. I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't chasing anything. I was just existing in the life I'd built, and it was enough. More than enough. It was beautiful. I thought about calling Julian and Mara my children. The people I'd created but couldn't hold on to because I'd trusted their mother to be honest, and she wasn't. But I'd learned that some relationships have expiration dates. Some people are supposed to be in your life for a season and then move on. My kids were older now, adults making their own decisions. If they wanted to find me, they knew how. If they didn't, that was their choice too. I wasn't waiting for them to come back. I wasn't holding space for some miraculous reconciliation. I was just living, and if they decided to be part of that life, then we'd have that conversation. If they didn't, then I'd have lived fully anyway. That was the real freedom. Not being okay without them, but being okay whether they came back or not. The business kept growing. New contracts arrived almost weekly. I expanded the workshop twice. I hired more people. I started teaching design classes to young Portuguese craftspeople who wanted to learn the trade. I was building a legacy, not for Clarissa, not for my kids, but for myself and for the people who chose to be part of my world. But none of that would have happened if she hadn't left me in that cafe. None of it. I'd be back in the States right now, probably in the same job, in the same marriage, feeling the same invisible death every single day. She'd freed me. She'd meant to destroy me, but instead, she'd freed me. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just freedom. Is there someone in your life who hurt you so badly you thought you couldn't survive it? And what if that hurt was actually preparation for something better? What if your worst moment was actually your beginning? Comment below and share your story. We want to hear about your transformation. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications because Chapter 10 is the final piece of this puzzle, and it's going to bring everything full circle. Your life matters. Your story matters. And the world needs to hear it. 5 years later, I was standing in my workshop in Portugal when a visitor arrived that I didn't expect. It was a young man, mid-20s, with my eyes and his mother's jawline. Julian. My son. He looked around the workshop like he was trying to see something in the space that would explain me to him. The handcrafted furniture, the designs on the walls, the small team of dedicated craftspeople working on custom pieces. All of it was evidence of a life I'd built without him, and I could see that realization hitting him in real time. "Your mom?" I asked carefully. "She reached out," Julian said. "About 6 months ago. She told me everything. The truth about the trip, about what she did, about how she lied to us." He paused, uncomfortable with emotion. "She told me I should try to get to know you. She said you were the strongest person she ever knew, and she threw it away." I didn't know what to say. After years of accepting that my kids were gone from my life, here was one of them standing in my workshop, trying to bridge a gap that had been years in the making. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked finally. It wasn't the question I was thinking. I was thinking about apologies and explanations and all the things you're supposed to say when you finally reunite with your child. But sometimes the simplest thing is the right thing. He nodded, and we went to my office. I made coffee the way Sophia had taught me, strong and real, not some weak American approximation. We sat there, and for the first time in 5 years, I had a real conversation with my son. He asked about the business, about how I'd built it from nothing, about why I chose to stay in Portugal instead of coming back to the States, about what happened after his mother left me in that cafe and what I did to survive it. I told him everything, not all at once, but in pieces over the hours we spent together. I told him about sleeping in train stations, about Sophia and her kindness, about Luca and the vineyard, about learning that survival isn't about what happens to you but about what you do with what happens to you. "I don't expect you to forgive your mother," I told him, "or to understand everything she did. She made choices, bad ones, but they were her choices. What matters is that you understand this. What she did to me was about her pain, not about my value. And when I stopped taking it personally, I was able to build something real." Julian listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend his mother or attack her. He just listened to his father, really listened, maybe for the first time in his adult life. Before he left to head back to the States, he hugged me. It wasn't perfect or easy. It was awkward and emotional and real. "I want to know you," he said. "If you're willing." I was willing. More than willing. I was grateful. After he left, I stood in my workshop watching the sunset paint the vineyard in gold, and I thought about everything that had happened. The abandonment, the survival, the rebuilding, the success, the unexpected reunion. It all mattered. It all led here. I'd learned that betrayal can either destroy you or transform you, depending on what you decide to do with it. I'd learned that being left behind isn't always the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes it's the best thing because it forces you to discover who you are when nobody's watching and nobody's believing in you except yourself. I'd learned that justice isn't always about revenge. Sometimes justice is simply becoming so successful, so content, so fully realized that the person who tried to destroy you becomes completely irrelevant to your life. That's the real victory. That's the real power. When Clarissa came back and couldn't believe her eyes, she wasn't looking at a man who'd sought revenge. She was looking at a man who'd become his best self not despite her, but because of her. She'd given him the greatest gift without meaning to, the necessity to become someone extraordinary. The story doesn't end here, though. This is just the beginning of a new chapter where my son and I are rebuilding our relationship. Where Mara is slowly coming around, asking questions, trying to understand. Where Sophia sits in my workshop every Thursday and reminds me that suffering is just a teacher if you're willing to learn from it. The moral of this story is simple but profound. Sometimes being left behind saves you. Sometimes the cruelest thing that happens to you is the catalyst that transforms you into something greater than you imagined. Sometimes your worst moment is actually your beginning in disguise. If you're going through something that feels like abandonment, like betrayal, like the end of everything you thought mattered, know this. You have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it build you. You can spend your energy seeking revenge, or you can spend it seeking excellence. You can hold on to bitterness, or you can hold on to possibility. I chose possibility. And look at me now. That's the real story. Not what happened to me, but what I decided to do about it. If this story has touched you, if you see yourself in Harlan's journey, if you know what it means to be abandoned and have to rebuild, comment below. Tell your story. Share your truth. Let other people know they're not alone in their struggle. We want to hear from you. Your story might be the exact thing someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. We bring stories of transformation, redemption, and real people becoming their best selves. These are stories about survival. Stories about strength. Stories about what happens when ordinary people are forced to become extraordinary. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know when someone's going to be in their darkest moment, and your share might be the exact thing that reminds them they can survive anything, that they can become anything. Thank you for watching Harlan's story. Thank you for believing that people can change. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the greatest love we can give ourselves is the refusal to stay broken. Harlan Pierce didn't destroy his pain. He transformed it. And that's why when his wife came home, she couldn't believe her eyes. She was looking at a man who'd become his own hero. And maybe that's what we all need to become, our own hero in our own story. Go build something. Go become something. Go show the world what happens when someone who was supposed to stay broken decides to stand up instead. See you in the next story.